A man in a simple gray jacket, his face a canvas of wrinkles and tired eyes. He looked like a retired professor or a seasoned carpenter, someone with stories etched into his skin. He didn't say a word. He just moved with a quiet purpose, his gaze fixed on my face. He wasn't looking at Alara. He was looking at me, at the raw, exposed pain I knew was smeared across my features. He walked right up to our table, and without a word, reached out and grabbed my hand. My body went rigid. I tried to pull back, but his grip was firm. Not aggressive. Just unyielding. Before we dive in, let's connect. If you've ever been betrayed by the person you love most, this story is for you. You'll want to hear the rest of my journey. Drop a broken heart in the comments if this kind of family betrayal hits close to home, and stay tuned, because the revenge in this story is more powerful than you'd ever expect. Just minutes before the man arrived, my daughter Alara sat across from me, explaining what she'd learned from Aunt Celeste's lawyers, a final will that left the house entirely to her. That house, Lyra's last touch, her garden, its faded paint, was the only place I still felt close to my wife. And now, with one revelation, it was slipping from my hands. My mind raced as the stranger held my hand. Was he a lunatic? A man with a grudge? Alara looked at me, confused. Then, he leaned in close, his breath warm against my ear. "The will you were told about," he whispered, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. "It's fake." My heart stopped. He was a phantom of hope in a storm of despair. And then, he looked directly at my daughter, his eyes hard and cold, and said the jaw-dropping words, "And your daughter, she's not the person you think she is." I yanked my hand away as if it had been burned. Alara's face, which had been a picture of calm concern, now twisted into a sharp, hostile mask. The man with the tired eyes didn't flinch. He just stood there, a silent sentinel of a truth I was suddenly terrified to hear. My daughter, the girl I had raised and loved, was looking at this man as if he were a ghost she had long buried. A ghost I didn't even know existed. "Who are you?" Alara hissed, her voice cutting through the soft murmur of the coffee shop. She had dropped the gentle facade completely. This was the real Alara, a woman I had never met before. "That's not important," the man replied, his gaze still fixed on me. "What's important is the will. I have the real one. Your father, Godfrey, he knew." He didn't say my father's name like a casual acquaintance. He said it with the kind of familiarity only a close friend would have. My father. A man I thought I knew everything about. A cold dread seeped into my bones. He was right about my father. But the rest? My mind reeled, trying to make sense of this new reality. Was Alara really capable of this? Was this man truly who he said he was? He looked at me, then at Alara, a silent question passing between them. He then turned back to me, his voice a low rumble. Godfrey knew about the debt, the gambling debts. The ones he kept secret from the family for years. He paused, a painful memory playing out in his tired eyes. He sold me something, a document, a way out. I promised him I'd look out for you. My world tilted. My father, the stoic, reliable Godfrey Vance, had been secretly gambling? And not just any gambling, but gambling that had racked up a substantial debt? What else didn't I know about the man who raised me? Alara broke the silence, her voice a strained whisper. "You said you wouldn't come back. You promised me." Her words were a confession, an admission of a secret pact I knew nothing about. My heart ached with a deep, crushing pain. The man, who I now realized was more than just a stranger, simply shook his head. "I made a promise to your grandfather first. A promise to make sure you were cared for, no matter what. That house belongs to you, and you alone." He was not a lunatic. He was a guardian. A guardian of secrets I wasn't meant to know. I watched him, and then I saw a familiar glint in his eye, a knowing look. It was the same look my father used to have when he knew more than he was letting on. This man was no stranger. He was a confidant, a friend from a life I never knew. This man was Yora. He was the ghost of a promise my father had made, a man who had known a part of him I never did. And now, he was standing in the middle of a coffee shop, holding the key to a truth that was about to shatter my entire life. "The real will," he said again, this time to Alara. "It's safe. It's in the place your grandfather wanted it to be found." He smiled faintly, a sad, knowing look in his eyes. He wasn't talking to me. He was talking to her. And I knew, in that gut-wrenching moment, that this was just the beginning. My mind was a spinning vortex of disbelief and pain. Yura, the man my father had once been close to, a ghost from his past, stood there, a silent challenge to my daughter's betrayal. I looked at Alara, really looked at her, and the beautiful mask she had worn for so long finally cracked. The poised, gentle daughter was gone, replaced by a desperate, cornered woman. "Get out," she hissed at Yura, her eyes narrowed to slits. "You have no right to be here. No right to interfere." She was fighting for control, for the story she had so carefully constructed. And it was a story built on sand. Yura didn't move. He simply stood there, a quiet force of nature, his presence a stark contrast to Alara's rising panic. "I have a right," he said, his voice low and firm. "Godfrey asked me to look after things, to make sure you did the right thing." The words hung in the air, heavy and loaded. He wasn't just a friend, he was an enforcer of my father's final wishes. The reality of it all was beginning to settle in, a cold weight in my stomach. My father, the man I thought I knew better than anyone, had built a second life, a secret life, and he had trusted this man, Yura, to be its guardian. My heart ached with a new kind of pain. Not just the pain of betrayal from my daughter, but the bitter, gut-wrenching sting of my own ignorance. How could I have been so blind? My father had always been quiet, reserved, but I had attributed that to his stoic nature. I had never once suspected a secret life, a secret world where he was a gambler, a confidant, a man with a plan and a backup plan. Yura's presence wasn't just a twist, it was a devastating revelation of my own failure to truly know the man who raised me. Alara finally looked at me, her face pale, her lips trembling. "Dad, he's lying. He's crazy. He's always been jealous of us, of what we had." The desperation in her voice was palpable. It was a last-ditch effort to pull me back to her side, to blind me with the familiar love I had always held for her. But the trust was gone. It had shattered into 1,000 pieces the moment Yura said her grandfather's name. I looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't see my daughter. I saw a stranger, a woman I had lived with but never truly known. I reached for the small wooden box I always kept with me. My father had given it to me on my 20th birthday. "For when you need guidance," he had said. I had always assumed it was a keepsake, a beautiful piece of craftsmanship. I had never opened it. Not once. But now, as I looked at Alara's frantic face and then at Yura's steady, knowing eyes, I knew I had to. My fingers trembled as I unlatched the tiny lock. Inside, where I always assumed a note or photo would be, was a folded piece of paper. Not a photo. And it was then that I knew. The box wasn't just a memory, it was a clue. And the pain of discovery was just beginning. The tiny piece of paper felt impossibly heavy in my palm. It wasn't a note or a message, but a small, hand-drawn map. The lines were intricate, almost like a child's drawing, but the landmarks were real. I recognized them instantly. The old oak tree in the park where my father and I used to feed the ducks, the crooked lamppost near our home, and a small, faded X marked on a specific spot in the attic. It was a treasure map. But the treasure wasn't gold, it was the truth. The paper rustled in my shaking hands, a sound that seemed deafening in the suddenly silent coffee shop. Alara's face, which had been a study in panic, now contorted into raw fury. "You weren't supposed to have that," she snarled, the gentle daughter facade completely gone. "That was for me. He told me he was giving it to me." The words were a direct admission of guilt, a confession that she knew exactly what this map was, and that she was supposed to be the one to find it. The depth of her deception hit me like a physical blow. She wasn't just faking sympathy, she had been playing a long, calculated game, one designed to strip me of everything I had left. Yura, a silent spectator to this unfolding family drama, simply watched. His eyes held a deep sorrow, a silent confirmation of my worst fears. He didn't need to say a word. Elara's outburst had done all the talking for him. I had loved her so deeply, believed in her so completely. But it was a love built on a lie. She had used my grief, my trust, to her own advantage, and the thought of it made me sick to my stomach. My daughter, the person I had dedicated my life to protecting, had been the one to leave me completely vulnerable. I looked at the map again, my eyes tracing the lines that led to the small X. My mind was a flurry of questions. What was at that spot? What was so important that my father had created a treasure hunt to protect it? And why had he given it to me, hidden in the one place I would have never thought to look? I had to find out. I had to know the full truth. The betrayal was like a physical wound, and the only way to heal it was to expose the lies. I need to go, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I stood up, the chair scraping against the floor, a jarring sound in the quiet space. Elara's eyes were wide with a new kind of fear. The fear of being found out. Yura simply gave me a small, solemn nod. He had done his part. He had delivered the message. The rest was up to me. I turned my back on my daughter, on the girl I thought I knew, and on the wreckage of my life. I walked out of the coffee shop, the small, crumpled map clutched tightly in my hand. The journey to the truth had just begun, and I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that the deepest, darkest secrets were still buried in the place I called home. The air was cool and damp as I stepped out of the coffee shop, the city's usual clamor feeling distant and hollow. The world outside seemed to be in a vibrant dance, but my heart was a still, frozen lake. I walked blindly, the crumpled map in my hand feeling like a burden and a promise all at once. Elara's panicked outburst replayed in my mind, her words a hammer blow to the foundation of my reality. You weren't supposed to have that. That was for me. Her betrayal was a living thing, a serpent coiled around my heart, squeezing tighter with every step I took towards home. I knew she would be following me. I could feel her presence, a cold shadow trailing behind me. She wouldn't risk me finding what she wanted. What she thought was hers. I felt a surge of adrenaline, a primal need to be faster, to get there first. This wasn't a game, this was a race for the truth, for my own dignity, for the memory of the man who raised me. I hailed a cab, the sound of the door slamming shut a jarring finality to the scene at the coffee shop. I was leaving the past behind, and racing towards a future that was completely unknown. The ride home was a blur of passing streetlights and rain-streaked windows. The city seemed to weep with me, the world an emotional echo of my shattered heart. I thought of my father. I saw his face, his stoic expression, the way he would look at me as if I were the only person in the world. I had to believe that he had a reason for all of this. That he hadn't just left me to fend for myself against my own child. That he knew what Elara was capable of, and had prepared for it. The map was my only proof of that hope. It was a lifeline he had thrown me from beyond the grave. The cab pulled up to the familiar front of my house, the lights in the window a welcoming beacon I no longer trusted. I paid the driver and rushed out, my feet barely touching the ground. My heart was a frantic drumbeat in my chest. I glanced back, and saw a sleek black car parked a few houses down. Elara. She was waiting, watching, her patience a testament to her desperation. I had to be quick. I ran inside, straight for the attic stairs, the cool air of the house brushing against my skin. The attic, the place where forgotten memories gathered dust, now felt like a foreign land. I found the spot marked with the X immediately. It was a small, untouched corner behind a stack of old photo albums. The same albums my father and I used to flip through, laughing at old memories. It was here, in this sacred place, that the final truth was buried. I got down on my knees, my hands shaking as I reached for a crowbar I had found in the garage. I began to pry up the floorboards, the old wood splintering beneath my touch, a tangible connection to the secret that lay beneath. My mind raced with possibilities. A new will? A letter? The truth about Yura and my father's past. The possibilities were endless, and each one held a new kind of pain. But I had to know. The betrayal was an open wound, and the only way to heal it was to face it head-on. As I pulled up the final floorboard, revealing a hidden compartment beneath, I could feel Alara's presence downstairs, listening and waiting. The climax was coming, and I knew it was going to change everything. The hollow thud as the floorboard came loose sent a jolt of cold electricity through me. It was done. I peered into the hidden compartment, my heart hammering against my ribs, a frantic rhythm of fear and anticipation. I could feel the weight of Alara's presence downstairs. The thought of her listening, her ears straining to hear, fueled a cold, hard resolve in my heart. This was for my father. This was to reclaim what was mine, what had always been mine. Inside the compartment, nestled in a layer of old, faded newspapers, were three things. The first was a large manila envelope, sealed with a wax stamp that bore the intricate insignia of a law firm I didn't recognize. The second was a small, faded photograph. I picked it up, my breath catching in my throat. It was a photo of my father, but not the father I knew. This father was younger, his face carefree, a mischievous glint in his eyes as he stood next to a man I now recognized as a younger, happier Yora. They were standing in front of a small, nondescript building with a sign that read, Vance & Company. Investments. My father had been a part of something I had no knowledge of. But it was the third item that truly stopped my heart. It was a small, ornate key. A key I had seen before. It was the key to my old childhood room, the one I had slept in before I moved out. It had remained untouched for years, a time capsule of forgotten dreams and childhood memories. He had known I would avoid it. He had known that it was the one place I would never look. A sob escaped my lips, a sound of both grief and a new, terrible understanding. My father had not only kept secrets, but he had also left a trail of breadcrumbs for me to follow. He had prepared for this moment, for this betrayal. The manila envelope was the new will, the photograph was the proof of his secret life, and the key was the final clue. A cold, hard resolve set in. This wasn't just about a house anymore. This was about reclaiming my life, my dignity, and the truth about my father. I heard the creak of the stairs behind me. Alara. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. I could feel her presence, a toxic cloud of jealousy and deceit. She was here for the compartment. For the contents. For the lies she had so carefully constructed. I tucked the manila envelope and the photograph into my pocket, the rusted key still clutched in my hand. I would not let her have it. Not anymore. I would go to the room. I would use the key. I would expose the truth, no matter how painful. I began to walk down the stairs, the final confrontation was coming, and I was ready for it. I walked towards the room, the key a cold, solid promise in my hand. The sound of Alara's footsteps behind me grew louder. I knew she was there, a coiled serpent of betrayal, waiting to strike. But I didn't turn around. I didn't acknowledge her. I had nothing to say to her. The silent accusation of my back was 1,000 times more powerful than any word I could have uttered. I reached the door and inserted the key. It was a perfect fit, a click so satisfying it was a relief in and of itself. I pushed the door open, the hinges groaning in protest, as if complaining about being woken from their long slumber. The inside of the room was a tomb of forgotten memories. Dust motes danced in the slivers of moonlight that streamed through the cracks in the blinds. The scent of old books and childhood dreams filled the air, a scent that had once been a source of comfort, a place of peace. Now, it was just another reminder of the life I thought I had. I saw my old bed, a canvas of unfinished dreams. The toys I had collected were gone, leaving behind ghostly imprints on the shelves. But in the center of the room, covered by a blanket, was something new. Something that wasn't here before. I walked towards it, my heart pounding a furious rhythm against my chest. I could feel Alara right behind me now, her breathing shallow and fast. I didn't care. Nothing mattered but what was under the blanket. I pulled it back, and my breath hitched. It was a desk, a beautiful, hand-carved desk, made from a rare, dark wood. I had always admired it. my father had gifted it to me as a child. The intricate carvings on the front, the small, hidden compartments. It had been the source of hours of enjoyment. I ran my hands over the smooth, finished wood. The care and attention to detail were so perfectly my father. It was a final, silent love letter to me. On the front of the desk, in a small, hidden compartment, was a document. It was a new will, typed and notarized, with my father's signature at the bottom. The document stated that the house was to be left to me, and the remaining assets were to be placed in a trust for Alara. But there was a condition. A final, devastating punch to her carefully laid plans. The trust could only be accessed if she stayed living with me. A stipulation she had lied about. I turned around, the will in my hand, and looked at Alara. Her face was a mask of furious desperation. "It's a lie," she said, her voice a low snarl. "It's all a lie." But the lie was her. She had never lived with me. She had spent the last few years playing the part, using my money, faking the documents, all to convince me she was worthy of this inheritance, of this life she wanted. My heart, which had been broken, was now shattered into a million pieces. The betrayal was so deep, so absolute, it was a physical ache in my soul. I looked at her, and I knew, in that moment, that she was truly a stranger. And that she had just lost everything. Alara's face was a mixture of shock and fury, a masterpiece of a villain's final, desperate moments. She lunged for the will, her hand a blur as she tried to snatch it from my grasp. But I was ready for her. I stepped back, the document held high. The quiet, gentle daughter was gone, and in her place was a person I didn't recognize. The mask had completely fallen away, revealing a twisted, ugly desperation that was a bitter reflection of her true self. "Give it to me, Dad. It's mine. It was always supposed to be mine," she screamed, her voice a shrill, ugly sound. "This," I said, my voice quiet, a stark contrast to her frantic panic, "was a test. And you failed." The words were like tiny daggers, each one a testament to her failure. My father had set this up. A final, impossible test. He had known. He had known Alara's greed, her deceit, and he had created this intricate web to protect me from her. The thought of it, of his selfless love, was a balm to my raw, bleeding heart. But the pain of his knowing, of my blindness, was still a bitter pill to swallow. The sound of a police siren wailed in the distance, a righteous sound that grew louder and louder. Alara froze, her eyes wide with a new kind of terror. "What did you do?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "I didn't have to do anything. You're had." He had been a ghost, a guardian, and now he was a silent avenger. He had called the police as soon as he had given me the clue in the coffee shop, a contingency plan for a scenario he knew would unfold. The police car pulled up, its red and blue lights flashing, a dizzying dance of justice on the front of my home. A tall, grim-faced officer got out, followed by Yora. He stood by the police car, his hands in his pockets, his face a calm, stoic mask. He gave me a small, almost imperceptible nod. He had done his part. He had fulfilled his promise to my father. Alara's gaze darted between me and Yora, her world crumbling around her. She was caught, her carefully constructed lie exposed for the world to see. The officer, a man with a tired face and kind eyes, approached us. "Mr. Vance," he asked. I nodded, holding the will out to him. "This is the true will," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "And my daughter has confessed to attempting to seize my property with a fraudulent document." Alara's face was a study in pure horror. The price of her greed was no longer just the loss of a house. It was the loss of her freedom. The officer looked at the will, then at Alara, and then back at me. "Ma'am," he said, his voice firm but not unkind. "You need to come with us." Alara's shoulders slumped. The fight was gone. She had lost. The bitter taste of revenge mixed with the sweet, satisfying taste of justice. But the story wasn't over. There was one more thing that needed to be done. I watched as Alara was led away in handcuffs, her head bowed in shame. The police car's siren was silent, the red and blue lights now a still, solemn warning. Yura stood by the car, a silent presence, a guardian angel who had appeared when I needed him most. I walked over to him, the manila envelope still clutched in my hand. "Thank you," I said, the words a rough whisper. "You saved me." He simply nodded, his tired eyes filled with a deep, knowing sadness. "I made a promise to Godfrey," he said, his voice a low rumble. "A promise to look after you." He knew what was coming. The realization hit me again. He had known. My father, my stoic, quiet father, had been so much more than I ever gave him credit for. He had seen the coming storm and had created a life raft for me. "He was a very smart man, Mr. Vance," Yura said, as if reading my thoughts. "And he loved you very much." He then pointed to the envelope. "There's a letter in there. It's for you. He told me to tell you that you would find it when you needed it most." He looked at me, a flicker of a smile on his face. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a long journey home." And with that, he got into the police car and drove away, a silent hero who had appeared from my father's past to save my future. I walked back into the house, the silence deafening. The place that was once a sanctuary now felt like a mausoleum. I sat down at the kitchen table, the manila envelope on the table. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside, nestled beneath the forged will, was a single, folded piece of paper. It was a letter, written in my father's elegant, familiar handwriting. The sight of it brought a fresh wave of tears to my eyes. This was the final chapter, the last piece of the puzzle. I unfolded it, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm. The letter began with an apology. "My dearest son," it read. "If you are reading this, it means I am no longer with you, and it means that my worst fears have come true. I am so sorry for the secrets I kept from you. I did it to protect you, to protect us." He wrote about his secret life, about Yura, about the failed business, and about his final act to protect me. He wrote about his fear that Alara, consumed by her own greed, would try to take everything from me. It was a confession, a revelation, and a final act of love. Then, at the very end, there was a paragraph that made me gasp. "The house is yours, my son. It has always been yours. But there is one more thing. I want you to know the truth. Alara, she's not our blood. She's adopted. Her parents died when she was young, and we took her in. We did our best to raise her right, but some things, you can't change. I loved her like she was my own, but I always knew she was different." The words hit me like a physical blow. The woman I had loved and raised for 30 years, the woman I had seen as my own daughter, was not my blood. The betrayal was so deep, so absolute, it was a physical ache in my soul. My mind reeled, trying to make sense of this new reality. The world had just been turned upside down, and the final piece of the puzzle had just been put in place. And I knew, in that moment, that nothing would ever be the same again. The letter fell from my trembling hands, a simple piece of paper that had just shattered my entire world. Alara was not my blood. My heart, already a map of scars and fresh wounds, now felt a new, unfamiliar ache. It wasn't the pain of betrayal, but the deep, bone-crushing emptiness of a 30-year-long lie. I looked at the kitchen table, at the chair where she used to sit, the phantom of her laughter echoing in the quiet space. All of it had been a performance. Every hug, every "I love you," every moment of quiet connection I thought we shared. It was all a lie. I reread the letter, my eyes tracing the familiar script, searching for any hint of a mistake, a cruel joke. But there was none. My father's words were clear, his love for me and his fear for what Alara would become were palpable. He had loved me so fiercely, he had protected me in a way I had never thought possible. But in doing so, he had created a new kind of pain. The pain of having a hole where a child's love should have been. I had spent so many years trying to be the perfect father, to give her everything she wanted, to be her rock. And all of it had been for a stranger. A stranger who had been waiting for the opportune moment to betray me. I walked through the house, the silence now a living thing, a heavy blanket of unspoken truths. I passed Alara's old room, the door closed, a finality to it that was both sorrowful and a relief. The memories that I had once cherished, the moments of joy and pride, now felt tainted, covered in a layer of deceit. I thought of the man in the coffee shop, Yura. He had known. He had known the entire time. He had looked at me with those sad, knowing eyes, and I had been so blind. So utterly, completely blind. My journey for the truth had not just been about a house, it had been about finding out who I was, who my father was, and who my daughter was. And the truth, while it had set me free from Alara's deception, had also left me with a new, profound sense of loss. I had lost a daughter I never had. The pain was different than the betrayal. It was deeper, more fundamental. It was the pain of a phantom limb, an appendage I had carried and cherished for 30 years that had never truly been a part of me. I sat down in the living room, the quiet hum of the refrigerator the only sound in the house. The television was off, the lights were low. I was alone. But for the first time in a very long time, I wasn't just alone in my grief. I was alone with the truth. I looked at the photograph of my father and me on the mantelpiece, his smile as stoic as ever. The lies had been about love. His love for me, his love for Alara, and his misplaced hope that she would become a better person. The revenge was a hollow victory. The betrayal was an open wound. But the truth was a new kind of freedom. A freedom to finally mourn, to finally grieve, and to finally begin to heal. The days that followed were a blur of lawyers, police reports, and a relentless, aching emptiness. Alara's betrayal had been fully exposed. Her lies had come crashing down, leaving her with nothing but the consequences of her own actions. The house, the money, the family she had so cruelly used, all of it was gone. But for me, the victory was hollow. The house was now just a collection of bricks and memories, haunted by the ghost of a daughter I had never had. The revenge, the justice, had been served. But it had not healed the wound. I spent my days in the garden, the place where my father had buried his final secret. I toiled in the soil, my hands rough and calloused, a tangible connection to the man I had loved. I pulled weeds, pruned bushes, and planted new flowers, each act a small, silent prayer for healing. I was trying to rebuild, not just the garden, but my life. The house still felt wrong, the walls echoing with the laughter of a lie, but the garden was a place of truth. The soil was real, the flowers were real, and the quiet, hard work was a real step towards a future I could finally call my own. I still thought about my father. About the secrets he kept, about the immense weight of his love and his burden. I had been so blind, so trusting. I had loved a ghost, a memory of a man I didn't know. And now, I was trying to love the reality of him, the man who had been strong enough to create a backup plan, to protect me from the person I thought was our blood. I was learning to love him for his flaws, for his secrets, for the man he was behind the stoic expression. One afternoon, as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the garden, I heard a car pull up in the driveway. My heart clenched. Was it Alara, somehow out, somehow back to try and hurt me again? I picked up a garden hoe, a foolish, useless weapon, and stood ready. The car door opened, and a man I didn't recognize stepped out. He was older, his face etched with the same kind of tired sadness I had seen in Yora's eyes. He had my father's nose, the same crooked shape from when he broke it playing football. He had my father's build, strong and capable. He walked towards me, his hands clasped together, his gaze fixed on mine. "Mr. Vance," he asked, his voice soft and trembling. "My name is Alden. I'm your brother." The world stopped spinning. The pain of the past few weeks, the endless cycle of shock and grief, seemed to coalesce into a single, breathtaking moment. The man who shared my blood, a man I had never known, was standing in my garden. A new chapter was beginning, and the final piece of the puzzle, the face of the lie and the truth, was standing before me. The healing had begun, and I knew, in that moment, that the story was not over yet. The word brother hung in the twilight air, heavy and foreign. Alden stood before me, a man who shared my father's eyes but none of my memories. The shock didn't just steal my breath, it reorganized my soul. The pain of Alara's betrayal, the emptiness of the 30-year lie, suddenly had a counterbalance. My father hadn't just hidden Alara's origins, he had hidden a son. Alden explained it all, his voice thick with old wounds. When the gambling debt started, my father pushed Alden away, terrified his mistakes would drag his other son down. Alden left, built his own life, and only Yora kept the thread connected. Yora had called Alden the moment Alara started making her moves, and Alden had come, not just to save a house, but to find his brother. We sat in the garden as the stars came out, two strangers bound by blood and betrayal. Alden told me how Yora had held the real wolf for years, waiting for the right moment, instructed by my father to only intervene if I was threatened. Alara's attempt to seize the house had triggered the failsafe. My father hadn't trusted Alara, but he had trusted Yora and Alden to protect me. The elaborate treasure map, the hidden key, it was all designed to ensure I found the truth myself, that I took control of my own legacy. The bitterness I held toward my father began to dissolve, replaced by a profound, aching understanding. He was flawed, he was desperate, but in his own complicated way, he had loved me enough to build a fortress around me. The next morning, the house felt different. The oppressive silence that had settled in after Alara's arrest was gone. Alden was in the kitchen, making coffee, and the smell was like a homecoming. We didn't talk about Alara. There was nothing left to say. She had made her choice, trading a lifetime of love for a stack of papers. She was gone, serving time for fraud, her life reduced to the consequences of her greed. The phantom daughter no longer haunted these halls. In her place was Alden, solid and real. We spent the week cleaning out the attic and the old room, the room my father had prepared. Alden helped me pack up the last of Alara's things, not with anger, but with quiet efficiency. It wasn't an act of revenge, it was an act of closure. We donated everything. The slate was wiped clean. The house, once a monument to a lie, was becoming ours. My sister Celeste, hearing the news of the real Will and Alden's arrival, backed off immediately, her own greed silenced by the united front we now presented. The story that began in that coffee shop was over. The man who grabbed my hand, Yora, had given me more than a warning, he had given me my life back. Standing in the garden with Alden, planting a new row of hydrangeas, I felt a peace I hadn't known in decades. The scars remained, but they no longer hurt. I had lost the daughter I never had, but I had gained the brother I always needed. The betrayal had nearly destroyed me, but the truth had set me free. My daughter took me to a coffee shop, and in that moment of shattering pain, I found my family. Thank you for listening to my story. If this story moved you, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more tales of family betrayal.